Before the 7th of October 2020, a lot of young Nigerians were under the impression that we don't fight back. We may laugh to keep from crying and hustle from dusk to dawn, but speaking truth to power wasn't just a Nigerian ideal, or so it seemed. That Nigeria has been plagued with the worst forms of corruption, political instability, and oppression is not news. However, the rise of its people to resist the status quo would certainly make the news. In the protests that transpired between the 7th of October 2020 till the 20th of October 2020, a new story of Nigerian patriotism was born. One that spoke of young people determined to draw the battle line against oppression, police brutality, and injustice. On their lips, a rallying cry.
Answers! What do we want? Answers! What do we want? Answers! When do we want it? Now! When do we want it? Answers! What do we want? Answers! What do we want? Answers! When do we want it? Now!
Hello. So there are two things you should know about me. First, my name is Godswill. Secondly, I'm Nigerian. Now, a little while back, I was thinking of a research project to work on for my dissertation, and I decided on police brutality in Nigeria. This was basically influenced by the event that followed the killing of George Floyd in the United States of America. It was quite saddening to see that Black lives were still being lost to racism and police brutality. However, in retrospect, what hit me even more was the fact that in Nigeria, where we have other forms of prejudice, police brutality was still taking the lives of many innocent Nigerians. And in my research, I discovered the hashtag #EndSARS. It turns out since 2017, there has been an outcry against police brutality suffered at the hands of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad in Nigeria. I decided to research on this hashtag and how far it had come. Now at the time, my research was directed mostly towards the fact that Nigerians hadn't yet raised this campaign as high as it should go to speak against the displeasure that we all felt. On October 1st, I released my poem calling for Nigerian solidarity, and almost coincidentally, somewhere on Twitter, the #EndSARS hashtag was picking up some heat after a video of SARS official killing a young boy went viral. Following that, there were nationwide protests which started on the 7th of October. Now, as a Nigerian looking from outside in, I couldn't be more proud because here were youths just like me standing up and speaking our displeasure to power. I was happy to contribute my voice on social media, and although I was not at home, I knew my voice mattered. So I retweeted, posted pictures, created art, wrote poems in honor of this movement that was going on in Nigeria. This odd phenomenon of participating through social media was new to me. Yes, we use social media, to know what's happening when it's happening, but in this case, I felt connected to the people on the protest grounds because I knew my retweets and conversation online was helping them in some form. The platform gave most Nigerians like me in the diaspora an opportunity to be part of what was happening in our country. So I decided to speak to more Nigerians in the diaspora to explore even further how social media helped in the most significant set of protests to happen in Nigeria in recent times. #EndSARS is a hashtag that is currently the embodiment of the displeasure an average Nigerian youth has against oppression and manipulation by the Nigerian government. Its primary purpose stems from over 2 decades of police brutality spearheaded by SARS, the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, which was created in 1992 to combat growing crime rates. Their illegal actions vary from harassment, rape, extortion, kidnap, and extrajudicial murder. Unfortunately, almost every young Nigerian has had to face this terror with little or no provocation, as the fact that possession of expensive devices, cars, or dreadlocks can make one a potential target. In a bid to raise awareness to the crimes committed by this arm of the Nigerian police, the hashtag was created and used on social media. Inadvertently, it created an easy way to accumulate and archive these stories and grievances, eventually becoming the rallying cry for justice. On the 1st of December 2017, the first mention of the hashtag #EndSARS was posted in response to the alleged death of a young boy at the hands of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. Since 2017, some activists have tried to champion civil action against this body, resulting in the repetitive promise of its disbandment. However, none of these promises had been followed through, and it all came to a climax in October 2020 with what many have begun to call the first time Nigerian youth will unite and stand up to power. Historically, this is not accurate. However, to young Nigerians under the age of 30, which accounts for 60% of the country's population, this is in fact their reality. EndSARS gave these young people the opportunity to finally voice their concerns and displeasure with the Nigerian state and those who lead it.
It all started with just one tweet. A Nigerian Twitter user posted in apparent shock that they had witnessed a police unit shoot a boy. Though as yet unverified, the story prompted thousands of people to come forward with similar tales and demand that the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, or SARS, be disbanded. Just this month, more than 1 million tweets have been sent using hashtag #EndSARS.
Eventually, the online uproar spilled to the street through a peaceful protest in Lagos on the 7th of October 2020. The protest would then start a ripple effect both online and offline as more protests sprung up in different parts of the nation, as well as other parts of the world. The protests gained widespread notoriety and drew much attention that led to government action. This positive response would later deteriorate to the unlawful oppression of protesters through water cannons, tear gas, and eventually military forces firing live bullets at unarmed citizens on a peaceful protest. In all that transpired, social media was seen to host some of the most pivotal actions that drove the narrative behind the actual protest.
The fire is in the young people, but social media has become the tool by which they communicate, they mobilize, they protect each other, they look out for each other, they're organizing, fundraising. It's amazing and beautiful to see.
Social media was also used for information, for sensitization, but also for communication, which is where I thought that the government did very poorly because it didn't anticipate that non-state actors were going to utilize social media as effectively. And so in lagging behind, it lost out in controlling the narrative. And as soon as it became apparent that it was difficult to control the narrative amongst a large population of a generation that are stuck most of the time on their devices and hooked to the internet, then it was really difficult for them to get people off the streets. It was difficult for them to get the protesters to say, okay, we have heard you and we're going to do this.
To further explore this relationship, I spoke with an expert researcher and documentary filmmaker with experience in police brutality.
There's an international and global movement of young people who are not willing to accept the power structures that have been in place post Second World War. So I think social media is the methodology that's been used to actually put these cases out.
This role of social media in escalating social justice effort is not new to research in the humanities. We have seen the influence of social media in social justice movement, most recent of which is the Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movement. Much like this movement, the EndSARS movement was born as a Twitter hashtag and has been able to transcend our screens to effectively affect culture and history. In carrying out this research, I spoke to Nigerians in the diaspora, which include the demography of Nigerian people who had to interact with the protest primarily through social media or other secondary forms of information distribution because of limitations related to location. Through the lens of our participants, we are able to identify how effective social media can be in transforming our concept of social justice and activism in Nigeria and the world in general.
We all know the effects that one tweet can have these days. It's just, at the end of the day, people are on social media. People are always there. This is how to reach people. And if you're trying to spread awareness about something, that is one of the most effective ways to go about it. Arguably more effective than doing things physically, because somebody can be at work and also be spreading awareness about EndSARS. Whereas if you're physically at the protest, you only have the reach of people around you. Whereas with your phone, your reach automatically multiplies.
Social media was actually the icing on the cake of the protest efforts.
This symbiotic relationship between technology and culture was projected by famous theorist Neil Postman on Technopoly. In his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, Postman theorized that the clearest way to see through a culture is to attend to its tool for conversation. If social media affords us the most of the world's conversation today, it doesn't come as a surprise that social media is in effect changing culture. Social media provides a new frontier for parrhesia, a Greek concept Michel Foucault used to explore the idea of speaking truth to power. Here, the citizen is seen as courageous for engaging the power structures of the Nigerian government with no regard for the risks they may incur. Hence, social media's relationship to the physical protest is tied closely to how it provides its user with a relationship to the truth through unfiltered commentary, a relationship to his own life through uncertain danger, and a relationship to other people through criticism. Another relationship to establish is that of non-violent resistance. In what some have come to call a democratic decline, the decentralized structure and pluralist practices of non-violent resistance provides an increasingly accepted way of speaking truth to power. According to Felix Bethke and Jonathan Pickney, non-violent resistance strengthens civil society, creating conditions that empower citizens to hold its government accountable. Through the technological advancement that is social media, a new form of non-violent resistance is emerging. Hence, social media has been studied as a means for activism or as an activist effort in itself. Through the course of my research, I am more convinced of the latter, citing that the premise of non-violent resistance is fundamentally disrupting power structures around culture, which can be seen through the impact of social media on the protest. With this premise, we can then move on to understand how social media activism plays a role in social justice efforts. Through the opinions of my dataset, I have been able to glean 4 themes that express the role social media played in the events of the EndSARS protests. The most prominent role of social media that was mentioned in almost every interview was that of amplification. For most of my participants, social media aided them to become aware of the biggest activism movement in Nigeria since they could remember.
If we had people just marching or protesting across the country and no one was saying anything about the movement online, it wouldn't have gained that much recognition internationally. People in the diaspora wouldn't have known about the gravity of the movement.
My primary source of information about the protest was Twitter, majorly because everything was happening on Twitter, and then every other thing like the international news stepping in and every article they did was secondary. But Twitter was my main source of information about the protest. That was how I was keeping up. That's how I was aware of the protest, and that is also how I disseminated information too.
Well, I think it's been largely laudable. The first thing I have noticed is how much the social media campaigns have been able to sensitize people as to what is going on. It seems that, in Nigeria, we seem to be largely separated along classicist lines. And so there is a social class of people that seem to be blissfully unaware of what we young people are talking about, and that is the EndSARS protest. And so when these things are trending on social media and people are sharing their stories, more people get to know about it home and abroad. So the first angle is from the awareness angle. It's fantastic. It's been trending for days, and everyone now knows that there is a problem.
This role of amplification was manifested in 3 basic forms: information, education, and exposure. When asked how they were informed about the protest, most participants commented on its overwhelming presence on social media, which led them to ask questions and find out what was going on in their home country. Education was through different media forms such as infographics and explainer videos, and the exposure brought the world's attention to EndSARS.
It's a very, very serious issue, and we need to talk more about it, which is why I'm making this video and also lending my voice to the cause.
The world is watching. Everyone is watching.
Newmeyer and Starr proposed that the ability of phones to document with video and images through internet access provides a true alternative to politically controlled mainstream media.
Well, with Twitter, there is no bias, there is no sponsor, and information is gotten directly from the people experiencing it. Especially in the case of the protest, we had people who were protesting, tweeting live, and also going on maybe Instagram or other social media. While the mainstream media, from previous knowledge, has always been biased and always been controlled by the people who are sponsoring them, who are paying for their adverts, and worse, even by the government and the body that controls them.
Speaking on this concept of amplification, Ambade writes that digital technologies present less powerful groups with a platform to speak out and make their voices heard. In direct contrast to the power structures propagated by mainstream media, social media present a democratization of voice in politics and economics, fundamentally changing the distribution of power in these sectors. Nick Coldry writes on this from a critical point of view, highlighting that the amplification of voice effectively changes the media sphere into a neoliberal democracy, which would mean the prioritization of market functioning above all other values within political, social, and economic organization. This helps us to navigate the underbelly that the protest had to deal with through the amplification of voice.
So social media played a very critical role in the sense that it amplified the voices of the youths in terms of what their demands were. So that was the good side of what social media did, but it also, had the negative side because it also amplified falsehood and fake news, which to a great extent triggered what has been happening the last 2 weeks in terms of people going out and vandalizing.
With the premise of popularity, negative elements such as exaggeration and falsifying of information became a major problem for the movement. People shared misleading information, inciting fear and violence by spreading lies that took advantage of the situation to push for personal promotion. It is no surprise then that this need to trend worked against the movement in some regard. Also, although the government responded in line with the demands of the protests through social media, we noticed a turn of events as the information offered by social media is queried and presented as dangerous.
Mr. Chairman, sir, the world today revolves around two things: smartphone and data. Smartphone, and the young ones we are talking don't even watch television, don't listen to radio, they don't read newspapers. And you'll be shocked that if you start arguing with your own daughter or your own son, she will be quoting as a Bible the social media.
When I went through the comments, I could not believe it, Mr. Speaker. The curses, the abuses from children. And I ask myself, is this Nigeria?
Hence, in one regard, social media pushed the protest to limelight, but it also gave a platform to fear-mongering and enabled the government with the reasons to fight the movement. Put succinctly by Dheeraj Murthy, social media may empower individuals to have a voice, but this could also lead to high levels of noise. The noise can then be seen as a collateral risk for using this means of non-violent protest.
If people were just filming and then they're going to walk away because they want to make some money or get famous or whatever, then that's going to happen in every situation. But I would rather they filmed it than not filmed it. I would rather it was out there than it not existing. So just to criticize people for not intervening has to be part of an education program where people are given the tools to intervene, which is knowledge and the power to know that what you can do, what are your rights within that situation. What can you do? Of course, people don't get trained when they get a mobile phone. You get into a shop, you buy it, and then you use it for what you want to. But the fact that people have got social conscience to hold up their camera and to film it and then to push through with it, because we know that in the George Floyd case, the person who filmed that has been harassed by the police. So there are risks involved, but I think people have to keep on filming and keep on documenting and putting it out there in social media. This is part of, sharing knowledge and in terms of educating people how power operates, how police violence operates, how state violence operates. But beyond that, it's really up to people to organise against it as well. We have to have these two things, conscious raising and community building. And those two things together is, where the struggle is at.
There was just so much evidence that the more you see through the stories, the more you become compelled to want to identify by either retweeting or telling your own story. And the more this information became known across the globe, people started retweeting #EndSARS, and eventually, it made the mainstream media, especially those abroad who jumped on it, because by then you know that popular people have retweeted it, and it also helped ensure accountability would be met regardless of how long it takes. Because I mean, it's like history now. This information are there unadulterated. Nobody could say it's not there. It's going to be there for the rest of humanity, except something happens to the internet.
I think the videos were more so impactful because you could easily see what was going on, and thanks to the Instagram live that DJ Switch did, we could see in the moment, especially with the Lekki Tollgate situation, we could see what was going on in the moment. That was how effective it was.
Social media is raw and unedited, so it does give the true representation of things sometimes.
Although many of the participants were aware of the menace that is SARS, the uproar that kept their attention on the movement was largely validated through social media. A close analysis of these comments raised two important concepts that propagate the validation provided by social media. One, the assumed authenticity attached to citizen journalism videos, and the platformization of cultural production that comes into play when we consider how celebrity culture influenced the narrative around the protest. Media institutions have for decades been in consistent competition of legitimacy. Nick Coldry's work argues that this depends on an offer of voice that is authentic, hence the prevalence of reality programming. Social media content offers this more readily because it is fundamentally created with an amateur aesthetic, prioritizing the recording of objects over the pictorial quality. This aesthetic therefore generates a sense of authenticity because the information captured through these mobile phone cameras is assumed to have not yet been edited to fit the desired narrative of the creator. Hence, when videos like these are published and shared rapidly, they present as truth. Even more authentic is the live coverage offered by platforms such as Facebook and Instagram, who offer real-time feed of an event, just like the now highly contested Instagram live video by DJ Switch. These videos and pictures give credence to the events that happened so that they are undeniable. A participant made an interesting comment that everybody was a newsman, and this is telling of the surveillance at play. The concept of surveillance presents an understanding of observation that is reciprocal to the surveillance that institutions have over individuals, thereby creating a disruption of power structures. It presents social media as a collaborative panoptic gaze, but in the opposite direction as proposed by Michel Foucault, placing the pressure on political powers which could lead to positive results. On the other hand, this authenticity may be prematurely accrued to this content as it is still influenced by the power structures of large tech companies such as Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Through the use of algorithms, privacy features, and forms of censorship, social media often works to continually reproduce and reinforce similar perspectives for users. Hence, critical consumption would be the best as opposed to blindly accepting anything as truth. A prime example would be the misinformation around the death of a celebrity involved in one of the protests, which turned out to be false.
There was no way the attention that this movement had would have happened without social media. Several international celebrities amplified the voices of the oppressed. Many people who may not have so much as known there was a country called Nigeria now knew of its political distress and unrest. And what this international attention brought was fear to our leaders, who would have otherwise thrived at covering their tracks and lying. Social media kept them on their toes to the point that it was too glaring not to see their camouflage.
The Nigerian youth, the social media, the social influencers, all of these are making the narrative that we are seeing today.
The context of validation was further propagated by the platformization offered through social media. social media presents a neoliberal structure where a person's volume of followers gives them power to influence the narrative around a subject. Now, the physical protest was presented as having no leader. Yet, the online movement was radically influenced by the recognition received from music celebrities, sportsmen and women, political figures, and brand accounts for large corporations, both locally and internationally. The fundamental problem with this is how truth is no longer tested on authenticity or revered on account of its importance. Rather, truth is defined primarily on its virality and/or popularity offered by other pre-existing structures.
People participate and lend their voices towards a movement in different ways and due to whatever reason they have. It could be in form of creating awareness and educating your followers online, going out to protest, encouraging people to donate, and etc.
Some people were donating, some engaging with organizations to discuss the way forward. Some were sharing videos and posting. They all contributed to the movement, while many others chose to go out and protest, both in Nigeria and abroad.
Social media gave the incident a global awareness. Unlike previous years where everything just dies down with Nigeria, this year, CNN took up the investigation and Twitter customized the hashtag because everyone had their role to play. When their battery died on sites, for example, those not on sites can continue retweeting to allow the issue stay on top of trends on a platform like Twitter.
It's great to see the world come behind a movement based in Nigeria. Rarely do we see issues in our continent receive widespread global support. And the missing girls is one example that had a similar global impact.
It's kind of like, even though you're not physically protesting, for the fact that you are lending your voice online or sending money or providing support in a way, shape or form, you might as well just kind of in a way be a protester too. It's just what you are doing, it's not working on the street.
The social media issue is not just one about consumption and people actually becoming aware of what's happening internationally, but there's a collectivism in social media which people haven't really appreciated yet.
A 2018 study on the role of social media in the Black Lives Matter movement by Masha Munt et al. Shows that social media serves as a tool for coalition building between similar bodies and allies. We find this coalition offered through social media having a global reach in the event of the death of George Floyd in the United States of America. Very similar to this was the attention drawn to the EndSARS protest across the world as different people showed solidarity in Nigeria's struggle against police brutality.
Thank you to the international community. Thank you to everybody around the world. The football community, the music, film, politicians, people that have given their voice, tech world. Like, the support has been massive, it's growing. And at the same time, there's also there's protests in Thailand right now and in other parts. I think that this is something that we're seeing. It's a new type of human that is evolving that the world has never seen. They're socially conscious, politically conscious, they want change, and they're not going to stand for the same old politics as usual.
It is quite interesting to note that a tweet or a comment with reference to the movement was considered support. This is reminiscent of J.L. Austin's performativity in his 1962 book, How to Do Things with Words, where he insinuates that all utterances perform actions. In this context, we find that the act of posting or interacting with EndSARS post is seen as a show of solidarity. This is even more played out in the fact that some of the participants who for certain limitations could not participate in a physical protest still felt a sense of patriotism in the effort they made online. Manuel Castells expressed this extension that social media affords us in his optimistic view of technology's influence on social construction. Unlike Neil Postman, he argues that technology affords us the ability to be global in reach but local in effect. The dissociation that comes from supply-controlled mainstream media is bypassed to allow for demand-controlled horizontal and networked communication Hence, we have an interconnected system that is a product of the contribution of its participants.
I felt more connected to the cause and was able to lend my voice in various comment sections and stories. I was also spurred to action to be part of the movement in the way that I could through my own profile.
I think the thing with social media is that it makes it easy for people to get invested in a particular theme or personal concept, and I think that's what happened in the EndSARS. I think people on social media, people in diaspora, Nigerians in diaspora, people that were not even Nigerians became very interested in EndSARS.
When the protest came to be, I felt it was a means to start maybe proper reform, not just in the police but the institutions in the country. So it informed me to aggressively get engaged with the whole process personally.
I feel I found fulfillment just signing petitions and posting about the EndSARS protest. Every information that I got, I tried to retweet, bringing out awareness, and I remember having conversations in like Zoom meetings with a few friends, and we just had debates. And the more conversations we had, we kind of created awareness. It brought up our awareness about the whole movement.
Much like Marshall McLuhan projected almost half a century ago, the instant messaging offered us by social media extends our ability to contribute to a cause even though we are miles away. However, it amputates active engagement in the cause. I believe this is the reason behind the assumption of social media activism as slacktivism, which is a laissez-faire form of activism characterized by minimal participation and unwillingness to inconvenience oneself for the cause. However, when questioned about this, my participants vehemently rejected this hypothesis.
I would be against that term. If someone chose to use social media to show their support, that is a perfect environment and a great benefit to the cause, as its message and meaning will be felt possibly by people all around the world by a click of a button.
This goes to say how social media is effectively changing the discussion around activism and participation. Providing a localized approach to activism could create for opportunities to organize across different issues and raise a formidable force against injustice.
I mean, if you have a political direction to a struggle, then nothing can distract you. But people have to get organized. It's simply not enough to have these explosions of demonstrations, because they subside. So it's about what happens afterwards, how people organize, and I'm sure people are organizing in Lagos and all over Nigeria. I'm sure people are planning things.
Yeah, they are.
They're planning things in the United States and the United Kingdom, all over. So people just have to keep organizing and not give up. Historically, the people do win.
The last EndSARS war was fought on social media. They mobilized and submitted news using their phones.
I have signed petitions. I have donated to the charity funding organization. And this to me brought me fulfillment because I believe in a way I did contribute to the protest.
I think the whole protest was driven by social media. Yes, people converge at strategic points to cripple the economy, but it was social media that helped protests remain organized to a large extent. It helped people know where and how to seek help. It helped people know what was going on in other states and protest areas.
That's another thing that social media did. It brought a coalition of people together, and they were now providing help, bringing people out, sending ambulances, bringing food, paying hospital bills. It was also used to raise funds for these things.
There was no tribalism, religious dispute. Everyone was protesting for one cause as a Nigerian citizen. Some people were donating, some engaging in organization to discuss the way forward. Some were sharing videos and posts. They all contributed to the movement, while many others chose to go out and protest in Nigeria and abroad.
For a country that had not seen a considerable effort at activism in the recent times, it was interesting to see novel modes of organization championed by unlikely leaders on social media. The Feminist Coalition was at the forefront of such online organization efforts and greatly contributed to the successful run of the protest, till its climax on the 20th of October 2020. Through the instrument of social media, the movement was able to create an organic structure foreign to anything the Nigerian political scene had seen. Newmeyer and Stoud commented on this dynamic by referring to the immediacy, mobility, and constant access afforded by mobile phones, which makes them especially useful for organizing and coordinating spontaneous protest events.
If anybody can remember, I think it was a few months ago, earlier this year, the government actually tried to pass the social media bill. And I think that, the people that were propagating that bill were afraid of this. So they were justified in being afraid of this because that is the power that young people have through social media.
Postman's Technopoly can be considered under this theme. Social media, which originally presented as a platform for conversation, has effectively redefined the cultural field of activism, thereby introducing new means of organization, funding, and communication. It provides a cultural field that exists outside of Nigeria's typical structures. Hence, with considerations to tribe and religion ignored, the youth presented a more united front. I believe this level of organization helped the youth in establishing its demands with one voice. And this unity gave the protests the power to put the government on check.
Social media has brought the dawning of a virtual war zone without any of the weapons, more to the advantage of the oppressed. Democracy boasts of boosting the voices of the people. In countries like Nigeria, where voices have been locked away in a soundproof cave, social media is the backdoor opening they forgot to check so that we can be heard again.
The purpose of this research was to understand the roles of social media in recent activism efforts in Nigeria. It goes a step further to analyze how and why it was functional according to media and cultural theories such as technopoly, platformization, performativity, and Marshall McLuhan's amputation and extension in media studies. However, with the scope studied, this research is limited in providing information on the possible after effects of these changes that social media brings to the Nigerian activism scene. But it gives us a firm framework of how these roles can affect protest, as seen in the case of the EndSARS movement. Another limitation of the research was exploring the resultant political atmosphere created through the protests, both online and offline. As there is a current call for social media censorship by the Nigerian government, there is a valid possibility that the events of this movement can directly overturn the political scene in Nigeria. Thus, an interesting opportunity for further research.
It cannot end in hashtags or posts and videos. We have to keep pushing and looking for other ways to make a change, either through donations, forming groups to address the issues in Nigeria, making sure people are getting their PVC to prepare to vote for those who have the actual people's interest at heart for the upcoming elections in 2023.
And social media has to be, like any other tool, used as a weapon. And it can't be just something to do with reporting what's happened. It has to be used, as a means of attack. And in our strategy, in terms of our filmmaking, our position has been one of not victimology. We're not interested in stories of victims because that fits in the media narrative, which is to give people no hope. All that ever happens, if you watch mainstream media, is the same message every day, day in, day out. There can be no hope, there can be no hope. And of course, we have to reject that.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's not so much that issue of whether it is or isn't useful, or, this kind of polarizing discussion, I don't really find that useful. What I would rather people focused on is the actuality of organizing with people, But you see, social media is certainly a very good. It's a can of petrol that you can throw on a spark.
Yeah. Sure.
But then, how do you turn those fires into a movement?
Now, at the recording of this documentary, there is no sign that the youth of Nigeria are going to back down in making sure that SARS and police brutality comes to an end in Nigeria. However, I hope this work provides us a context to understand and harness the tool of social media to reach a better society. Personally, I am doing what I can and contributing in all the ways social media affords me till I am physically on ground with my comrades. In the end, it is not what social media does that is worthy of note, but what social media gives us the opportunity to do.